Welcome to the Red Shirts Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts,
Jon Helmkamp,
Matthew Betz, and Matt Okada.
Welcome back in to the show, to the Red Shirts Dynasty podcast, a Ball Blast football production. I'm joined by my two dancing co-hosts, Matt Okada and Jon Helmkamp. Fellas, I don't know why, but it honestly feels like it's been years since we've talked on the mic. I'm so happy to be back with you guys tonight. How are we doing, fellas?
Doing the do.
We're doing the do.
That's all I got to say about that. A lot going on in football news today, so for once.
Yeah, lots of stuff.
Not great news, but
no, not wonderful news, but lots of moving pieces, lots of things to be ironed out as everyone's kind of getting back to camp and reporting today, and COVID testing and opt out and what that looks like and who's doing what, and there's a lot of moving pieces over the next week or so. It's going to be very interesting to watch.
Yes, we were recording this on July 28th, the day training camps officially opened, I guess, and players started reporting. Of course, with that, we do have some news to talk about, and we'll get to that all in a second in terms of what that means for COVID-19 and kind of what to look for this season. Jon did a fantastic job, wrote up an article on the website, ballblastfootball.com, looking at every player that is opting out this season. So it's a lot to keep track of. I don't know about you guys. My phone was buzzing like nonstop between our group chat and Twitter notifications for like Ian Rappaport and Shefty, like just so many players like opting out or what have you. So we'll talk about all that tonight. Before we do, a reminder, find us on social media at RedShirtsFF Check out the website, ballblastfootball.com. Our projections are finally live for our Patreon members on the website, as well as our rankings for 2020 redraft leagues. Patreon.com/ballblast is where you join that. And also, reminder, check out the Ball Blast Football Podcast with Kate and Michelle. They're crushing as per usual. We are on a mission to provide the best fantasy content we can, and that includes the show. Fellas, should we get into some news?
Yeah.
Sure.
I got great news, guys. Oh, news. Hey, news. Yes. News.
All right, we talked about it a little bit. COVID opt-outs are coming down the pipeline like crazy. First, let's start with a couple of rookies. We had Justin Jefferson and Keyshawn Vaughn added to the COVID-19 exempt list. And basically what that means is we're not really sure. So with this agreement between the NFLPA and the NFL, essentially players can be put on this list saying either they are testing positive or they have been in contact with someone who might have been testing positive. So they're ordered to kind of quarantine, or they know they've been close to someone who has contracted COVID. And so they have to basically stay away from the rest of the team. So this list is going to grow, I feel, probably more than we want it to in August and September, et cetera. And these two are the first kind of, I feel like, notable fantasy players that are going to be affected early on in training camps by this. So, fellas, let's talk about what it means for fantasy. Keyshawn Vaughn, I feel like, was our hype boy. Like, we love this dude in draft season. Jon was beating the drum for him. But guys, I'm afraid to say it. I feel like in redraft leagues, like Ronald Jones might be of value with this extra wrinkle coming into Keyshawn Vaughn's training camp. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, what the main problem here is that what you mentioned with the not knowing what it means yet is a huge factor because, and this is going to sound a little bit insensitive, but a player getting COVID now is arguably the best thing for fantasy drafts for that player. Like Zeke has had COVID. We don't have to worry about it anymore. He is at no risk. So if that's the case, it almost raises their stock for redrafting a little bit. Now, of course, not being there for the first week or two of camp is not great. But if it means they have a better or lower risk of missing parts of the season because of potential exposure or having the virus, then that's actually a good thing. Now, if they're just being put on the shelf because they were maybe exposed and then they missed 2 weeks of training camp, don't have that time to start gelling with the team, come back and still have another chance to get exposed again or miss more time again, that's doubly worse, as bad as it can get. And then, yes, we are looking at a situation where maybe it takes longer for a rookie to earn the role that they could have had.
Yeah, it's concerning to me. Like you're saying, those players, if they do have it, and again, part of the agreement between the NFLPA and the league is that the teams, for privacy reasons, are not disclosing which of those two options it is.
Yep.
So they're not going to tell us Justin Jefferson tested positive. If he goes and takes to Twitter on his own, great. He's more than happy to do so, and he can let everybody know. But we don't know if he has COVID or if, for him, I think it was because maybe it was the staff member. I can't remember who the staff member was for the Minnesota Vikings that tested positive within the last couple of weeks. It might have been exposure to him. I don't know. We have no idea. And that's part of the veil that we're going to have to operate under this year. We are not going to know all the backstory of everything unless they specifically tell us. But like you were saying about if they do get it, maybe it's better for their stock. Yeah, I think it lowers the risk, but there are cases out there of people contracting it multiple times. So I don't know. I don't know if that really goes into the equation in terms of does it raise or lower their draft stock. To me, I'm looking at this as two pretty high-profile fantasy rookies coming into this year who already have not had an off-season program in person. They've been doing all their studying remotely. Now are going to be on the shelf for 2 to 3 weeks of training camp. They're not going to have a preseason. I don't know that these guys are contributing right away, basically at all. Like, they might not see the field early in the season because they just are so behind the 8 ball at this point with this whole COVID situation. So it's really concerning for redraft purposes. Yeah, I think Rojo's got a really good chance to hold on to that gig, and if he performs really well, Keyshawn Vaughn might not really have a whole lot to say about 2020.
We will see. It kind of pains me. It kind of pains me to kind of be in on Rojo at his ADP redraft leagues, but here we are. 2020. Just when you thought 2020 couldn't get worse, here we are. Next piece of news here in regards to COVID-19 is the opt-outs that came down the pipeline today. Not too many superstars as far as like fantasy football specific positions we care about, but Devin Funchess of the Green Bay Packers has opted out. Marquise Goodwin, now of the Eagles, has also opted out, as well as big-time players in the Patriots defense. Patrick Chung, Dante Hightower, probably the two biggest names to opt out so far. Fellas, I'll just kick it back to you guys. What are your thoughts here on these situations? I don't think these players are anyone they're really counting on in fantasy, but certainly it opens up a little bit more opportunity, maybe for Jalen Reagor, maybe for someone else like an MVS to have a second chance to step up. We'll see. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, in the Packers situation, it just takes another piece out of the which Packers receiver is going to step up, which is good for anybody who likes any of the other pieces that weren't Funchess, which I think for the most part is us. Exactly. That's just another guy out of the way of Alan Lazard, or if you prefer MVS. So that's a little bit of a boost. Again, that whoever's going to win that second job still has to beat out the other couple guys there, and they're all maybe liable to do diddly squat because that's pretty much what they all did last year. So that's not a huge deal necessarily. For the Eagles, I don't know how much this matters. I wasn't super interested in Marquise Goodwin. They still have a bunch of speedsters that they picked up or drafted, and we're going to throw all over the camp to see what could happen anyways. And the real piece of that offense I want, which are Zach Ertz and Miles Sanders, I don't think get affected too much by Goodwin being gone.
Yeah, I basically agree with everything that you just said. Some of the other things to keep in mind, it's going to be interesting to watch how defensive pieces opting out impacts, matchups, strength of schedule, stuff like that. Obviously you're talking about Dante Hightower and Patrick Chung, but Eddie Goldman for Chicago is a really big blow to the interior defensive line there, who we already were thinking that defense is not what they were a couple of years ago. That might be an easier team to run against than what was previously thought about. There's going to be so much to kind of unpack as this starts to really come down. Some of the offensive linemen opting out. Obviously, Kansas City's offensive lineman.
Duvernay
Tardif.
Yes.
Yeah. who's a doctor. He is opting out to continue to fight this virus. Like, really, really awesome story. Good for him, praying for him and his health and the health of his family. But the offensive lineman, how's that going to impact everything, and pass blocking and run blocking? There's going to be a lot of stuff to kind of unpack. Now, what's good is that this is not going to be an ongoing thing throughout the course of the season. They're going to have roughly another week from today on the 28th. As soon as they get that document finalized and they start the 7-day window, there will be a 7-day window. We'll track it all. We'll keep track of everything. And then after that, we can unpack it and be like, okay, we don't have to worry about someone just being like, I'm done and not, and opting out mid-season very much. It might still happen. People might get the jitters and decide not to play and just take the goose egg and the penalty. But, it's going to be a very interesting week to watch.
Certainly is. All right, boys, we're going to move on to the divisional preview, starting with tonight's show. We're going out west. We're going out to the NFC West. We're talking about a loaded division here. And, of course, we're going to put a dynasty spin on it. So, the fellas and myself, we were texting pre-show. We're like, what do we want to do with this? Do we want to, have an outline doc and just kind of, go around the room and say who we're buying, who we're selling? No, we're not doing that. That's boring. We're going to do just conversation, 3 guys talking dynasty football for each division. And we got to start with the Seattle Seahawks, fellas.
Let's go.
I just want to let's talk about the receivers. I feel like that's kind of where the most dynasty question marks come in. In redraft, I've been higher on Lockett than Metcalf. I think we would all probably agree, though, in dynasty, you guys would have Metcalf ranked above Tyler Lockett. Would you agree?
It's close for me. I'll go ahead and say that because I know that John is a big DK truther. For me, it's pretty close. I think that DK can take the next step, but he has to take that next step for me to then want him over Tyler Lockett in the short term. And since I already know Tyler Lockett is there, it makes him a little bit of a safer asset. It might just kind of depend on what kind of roster I'm trying to build. DK Metcalf has so much upside. And if I'm looking to win a championship in 2 years, maybe he's a much more attractive option. But Tyler Lockett is super reliable and trustworthy asset right now. So they're right next to each other pretty much in my rankings. And I would just kind of be team dependent on the two of them.
Yeah, they're basically right next to each other in everyone's ranking and ADP. They're going basically back to back all over the place. It's a real 1A, 1B situation, which hurts the ceiling of both in an offense that is not notoriously a high-powered throwing offense. So
True.
Both of these guys, I think without the other, could be a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy if they threw the ball more. If they let Russ throw 550-plus times, which I think he's only done once, maybe twice in his career. A couple seasons ago, I think he cracked 550, 557 or something like that. If they decide to go to a higher volume passing attack, then both of these guys could be great values. But Lockett is just so reliable. He's sneaky good in the red zone for not being a big guy, and has that great chemistry with Russell Wilson where they just seem to connect on every throw. So, yeah, I think win now, I'd probably take Lockett, but I do think that Metcalf – and just his raw athleticism and then learning how to play wide receiver at the NFL level, I think that he could usurp Tyler Lockett in the back half of this season if everything goes right, as really kind of being the 1A in that passing attack.
Yeah, and I think too, just looking at Okada's tip has been in the last 2 or 3 episodes, you have to know contracts of these players. It helps you out so much in Dynasty. Tyler Lockett's extension was only through 2021. So, we're obviously looking at 2020, but we can't forget, DK Metcalf is the future of this team. Super young, extreme athleticism. Russell Wilson is his quarterback. And while, yes, we wish they would throw the ball more, I'll take Russell Wilson's one all day, every day. And if it's going to be DK Metcalf, I feel like if you trust him as much as John trusts him, you have to trade for him now. If you wait till week 10, week 12, it's too late. And at that point, you're not going to get him because at that point, he'll likely explode. And then, of course, 2021 comes around. Everyone's going to know Tyler Lockett's contract's coming up. So if you like DK Metcalf, you have to go out and get him now. Otherwise, you're not going to get him. Fellas, what are your thoughts on the running back room here? I mean, it's Chris Carson, Carlos Hyde, DJ Dallas is a rookie that we kind of like a little bit. Of course, Rashad Penny's still there, but likely to start on PUP coming off ACL. Does Chris Carson provide a win now piece for our dynasty rosters? What are your thoughts?
Honestly, I think that answer should primarily come from you because, simply put, if he's healthy, the answer is yes, without a doubt. He is their guy. They like him. They will run him pretty much no matter what he does, including fumble the ball.
Yep.
But it's for a good reason. He is productive. He has been very good for them. And it has worked for their offense for the most part. So as long as we are going to get a good, 12, 14 plus games out of him, I think he can certainly be useful for now. And I expect that as long as he remains somewhat healthy, he will be the guy for them in the near term. So I like him as a piece decently well.
Yeah, I mean, for his injury, it really is one of those ones that I need to watch in training camp because he's coming off of a fracture inside the hip joint. Fortunately, it was not one that required surgery, but that hip now is going to be something that will take time to kind of acclimate to the forces of football. So heavy acceleration and cutting, getting tackled, all those sort of things that you just can't really replicate. And guys, in training camp this year, they're having 8 padded practices. That is it. So I'm going to be watching him closely to see what he's doing. I don't know. I feel like for me, I need to definitely be a top 3 team to go out and get him and trade an asset on my roster to get him. Otherwise, I think I'm just kind of out on this backfield unless I took DJ Dallas in like the 4th round of a rookie draft. John, maybe you can speak more about him as a prospect. I know since you're kind of the running back scout on the show, what are your thoughts on DJ Dallas? Go out and buy him, just hold him. What are your thoughts there for the rookie?
Yeah, I think that you can buy him, and I think you can buy him really cheap. And with that backfield being notorious for just whoever plays better is going to play. They don't care about draft capital at all. Chris Carson was a 7th rounder. Rashad Penny was a 1st rounder, and Chris Carson has made Rashad Penny completely irrelevant. They don't care about draft capital. So if DJ Dallas gets a chance and he's doing well, if Penny starts the season on PUP like we think he's pretty much locked up to do, and Chris Carson is still banged up and not up to playing speed, and they let DJ Dallas onto the field. They still have Carlos Hyde there that they just picked up as well. But if DJ Dallas gets an opportunity, he could carve out a role, and they could look at him and say, okay, you could be the 2020, late season to 2021 running back. So in Dynasty, yeah, he's basically free right now, unless you have a super hyper owner that just loves him coming out of Miami. But he's an explosive guy, runs well. His tape's good. His production's good. I like him a lot. He contributes in the passing game more than what Chris Carson is capable of as well. So I think that he could fit that scheme pretty nicely if he does get the opportunity to do so. So from a dynasty perspective, I don't know that Chris Carson is going to get the extension past this year if he's battling through an injury all year. They might be like, we've got enough other assets to move on from Chris Carson after 2020. DJ Dallas is a really good, I think, speculative buy, and then hold for another year and just kind of see what happens.
I like it. We talked Russell Wilson quite a bit on the last show. We talked about players we're selling in Dynasty if your team is just not ready to compete and it's time to blow it up. John actually brought to the table his quarterback, Russell Wilson, which Okada and I were shocked about. If you want more on that, go check it out. However, short-term outlook still looks good for Russ, even though they won't let him cook. He's just so efficient, man, and he's got this insane wide receiving core with those two. They're so good. Okada, you have a thought?
I do have a question for John because the main premise for the Russell Wilson sell was that it looked like the Seahawks might be blowing it up in a couple years. Then they pulled this Jamal Adams move, which very much indicates that they think at least that they can compete and win Super Bowls. Does that change things at all for you?
I think it does because they basically mortgaged the future to do this. Like they're not in a position anymore to potentially blow it up. It's like, no, you just gave away the next 2-year firsts.
They don't have any TNT left. No,
they don't have anything to blow it up with. Like, they can bring a Piccolo Pete to the table and see what happens. So I think that they're in on just retooling around this offense. So, I mean, with one trade, I think they basically made my argument against Russell Wilson irrelevant last week.
So don't go back and listen to that pod.
So don't go back and listen to that one. No, listen to it. Just ignore what I said about Russ. But I am just concerned still.
3 times.
Fast forward through the Russell Wilson part. I'm still very concerned about their offensive line, which has been a problem for 5-6 years. I'm still very concerned about pass rush, which they still have none. But this defense is predicated on having elite safety play, and Jamal Adams is the best safety in the NFL right now. So I love it. I think that they're going to give him – he's the next Earl Thomas. He's going to be just what Earl Thomas was, a heat-seeking missile back there that they've been lacking for a few years now. I'm so excited to see him suit up. I'm probably buying that jersey this year. I'm all in on that signing. So, yeah, I do think that they're going to have to just keep the nucleus together and write it out and try to patchwork offensive line and pass rush and let Russell Wilson try to be the magician that he is. I'm pretty sure that's just kind of the recipe that they're deciding to continue to go with. So, yeah, I think Russ, Lockett, maybe Lockett. We'll see what happens there. DK Metcalf. They're probably going to need to go out and get some more wide receiver depth, either via trade this year or in the draft next year for sure. They've got 1,000 tight ends that they don't know what to do with, and one very, very veteran tight end coach in Greg Olsen. So we'll see what happens with this offense. But I think that Russell Wilson's pretty much just locked into being what he is, which is quarterback 3 through 7 every single year for probably the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. Okada, I don't know that I've seen Jon smile as much as I just saw him right there for that last 60 seconds or so. His cheeks got a little rosy. He just this look.
Jamal, let's go. It's been a minute.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think we need to touch on the tight end situation for Dynasty. I mean, Greg Olsen, it's a 1-year deal. He's done it for this year. Will Dissly coming off 2 of the possible worst injuries to really have for an athletic type of player. So, yeah, nothing really to discuss there, in my opinion. Fellas, let's move on to the Cardinals. Let's talk about Kyler Murray. Let's talk about DeAndre Hopkins. Let's talk about Kenyon Drake. This offense we want yes, if you want to see Jon dancing on the camera, YouTube is the place to do it. Check it out. And if you're not watching on YouTube, you know you're doing it wrong. Fellas, let's start with Kyler. I mean, I feel like the price in Dynasty has gotten so insanely expensive. I think last time I looked at our consensus ranks, he was our QB3. I feel like that's probably on par with consensus. Maybe some QB4s out there in rankings. But if you want Kyler, especially in a super flex league, I mean, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg to get him. Is it worth Dynasty players going out and making that move? Like, do we feel that confident in it? Or is it, okay, the price is too much, maybe we wait for a buying window later in his career?
It kind of boils down to this for me. He's going as the QB3, but the price gap between him and the QB2 is massive. You have to pay a lot more to get Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes than you have to pay to get Kyler. And I think that there's a very good chance after year 2 with Kingsbury and DeAndre Hopkins in his receiving core that by this time next year, we're going to be talking about the price gap between Kyler Murray and the next group being what the price gap right now is between those top 2 and everybody else, because I think he may jump into that tier. So even though his startup value is super, super high, you have to get him the very early rounds, especially in super flex. And even though you're certainly going to have to give more than a first to get him in a super flex in terms of picks, I might go and try to buy him now, even at the high price, because of how much more expensive he could be this time next year, given how well the team is looking to be building around him.
Yeah, I completely agree with that assessment. I think that he's great. If you happen to have a team, and I know it seems rare to do, but I actually had one of these rosters. I was in the process of blowing it up because I was right in the middle of the pack, and I hate being in the middle of the pack. And that was a team that managed to have Mahomes on it, but I still only won like 7 games or something like that. I'm like, how the hell? I don't understand having Mahomes and not being in the championship. It doesn't make sense. But what the hell you say to me? But with that, like if you have Mahomes or Lamar, selling that for Kyler Murray plus, I love it. Like go Mahomes for Kyler Murray. And
what was the plus you got? Didn't you do exactly that?
I did this. It was Mahomes for Kyler Murray and AJ Brown, I think.
Oh,
I think that was the trade that I pulled off, and I was like, "Yeah, no, I'll take that all day long."
Yes,
all day long. Give me a young ascending
slap on the base.
Yes, slap on the base, man. So that's a great way to go if you have one of the elite quarterbacks and you're looking for more depth, more assets. going down to Kyler plus would be great. If you're in a team that you think is contending and you have a fringe quarterback one like a Wentz, I'd be fine giving Wentz plus for Kyler to put me over the top, because I think that Kyler's going to have that kind of season where he is going to be like on league winning rosters, especially with his rushing upside, especially with second year in the system, Kenyon Drake. You bring in DeAndre Hopkins. This offense might take a little bit to get going in the early weeks because it is new and lack of offseason and stuff like that. But I think for the second half of this season, this offense is going to be absolutely cooking. I think it's good things for that offense. This is like the next powerhouse offense that you want assets out of. You know what I mean? Like there was the Rams a couple years ago. We all still love Kansas City, like
Cowboys now.
Cowboys. Arizona's like that next offense that you want all the assets out of that offense in Dynasty.
Let's talk about Kenyon Drake. We talked about him a little bit on the last show. Just like if you're not in it this year, there's just too many question marks to like go out and get him at his price. I think I talked about it on the show. His startup price last time I looked was 3rd round ADP, which I mean at that price in a startup draft is just too much. But if you are a contender, I feel super confident in Kenyon Drake being a top 10 back in 2020. Fellas, if you're a contender, what are you trading to get Kenyon Drake if you're like one running back away from a championship run? Mid 2021 first?
Am I willing to give a mid first? That's a tough
for the
one,
ship, man. It's for the ship.
Yeah, it is for the ship. I'm willing to do it. I think I go off of what John said. I don't think it was on last episode. I think it was probably several episodes ago. I believe he said something to the effect of that Kenyon Drake will get something somewhere after this year.
A couple months back, we were talking about it. Yeah, and I think that he's going to earn himself a contract, like a 2-year deal at like $9 million per season, something like that. I could see him earning a contract.
And
like
I'm fine with that. I don't need him to get a 4-year, $14 million a year deal to feel good about having paid a mid first for Kenyon Drake. So as long as if I'm buying into the idea that he's going to get another short-term contract either with Arizona or maybe another team, and I know I'm going to get an RB1 season out of him this year, I'll pay mid first, I think.
Yeah, I'm for that. I'm even thinking that I might pay more than a mid first, just because I think that when you're looking at the first round draft picks, you're like, it's the joke, right? It could be anything. They could even be what you're trying to acquire. Like there's no guarantee that first round pick is gonna end up being anything.
Very true.
And if I'm going in to win it right now, like we thought that going into this last season that a mid first was like a slam dunk value, and now all of a sudden, if you had like the 106 in your rookie drafts this year, you're like, okay, well suddenly there's a lot of question marks on all the players right here. So yeah, they could amount to something in a couple of years. They could be in a CeeDee Lamb situation who we don't know what role he's going to have in the offense for a while. So that first, if you're rebuilding, you need those assets. You want those young assets to develop into things. But if you're winning now, that first next year isn't doing anything for me. And if I can give that first, maybe even plus like an RB3 type, like Jordan Howard plus a first to go get Kenyon Drake or something along those lines, I would probably pull that trigger in a heartbeat and be like, I'm all in winning right now, because that's the whole point, right? You play to win. You don't play to constantly be rebuilding. Once you get close, get rid of those draft picks and go get players that are going to help you win the trophy this year.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair, and that's a good strategy point too. Like you can't be like toes in the water, like I'm going to maybe try to win this. Like no, you got to jump all in and like go after it. Otherwise, like we said on the last show, 2 shows ago, like you cannot be stuck in the middle. So yeah, I think that's fair. Guys, they ran a league high 33% for wide receiver sets last year. I mean, this is essentially like a spread college offense. With that, now you add DeAndre Hopkins, Kenyon Drake, or Chase Edmonds. Whoever is getting the ball there is going to absolutely smash for our fantasy rosters, which I love. Let's talk about maybe wide receivers not named DeAndre Hopkins. Obviously, they spent capital on Andy Isabella. Hakeem Butler was kind of the buzz last year as a rookie. Of course, he missed the entire season with a finger injury. Is there any like ancillary piece on this team not named DeAndre Hopkins? Obviously, Christian Kirk's up there as well, that you guys are going out and trying to get on your rosters maybe for cheap?
Not really. I think it's like the Packers situation, super light, because we're talking about a bunch of guys fighting for the third spot,
Right.
and it's pretty much just as murky. I like Andy Isabella quite a bit, but he's not going to get a target share in this offense that is going to support him being a reliable asset. I think we'll have a lot of good plays, some 40-yard touchdowns that feel great, but you're not going to have him in your lineup any of the times that happen. So I'm not really super interested in any of those pieces. I'd rather pay the extra stuff that is needed to get Christian Kirk and just feel good about that.
Yeah,
I'm the same way. Yeah.
Yep. Cool. All right, fellas, let's wrap it up there. Before we move on, I want to remind everyone about the sponsor of tonight's show. You heard us talk about the ultimate draft kit at the start, but here's our second sponsor, guys. It's awesome. It's Tiny Whiteboard Workouts. You've heard this name before. You heard it on the last show. I got to remind you guys about the podcast that they have. If you like podcasts, obviously you're listening to this, check out the Tiny Whiteboard Workout podcast with my good friend, John Williams. He's a strength and conditioning specialist. He's got a show. He's talking injuries. He's talking ways to kind of prevent injury, which as a physical therapist, I love. So check that out. You can find it anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, etc. Coming up, mark your calendar, August 3rd, next Monday. He has a very special guest on with him to talk about why you shouldn't really be icing your injuries, which is kind of, not really what you would think. So check it out. Super cool. I'm really interested to tune into that. Again, August 3rd, Tiny Whiteboard Workouts podcast. Find it anywhere you get your podcast. Boys, we are on to the Niners. I like this team a lot for Dynasty. I'm really intrigued here to get your guys' thoughts. Do we really even need to talk about George Kittle? I mean, come on. The dude is a monster. He's the tight end one in my Dynasty ranks. I believe you guys agree?
Yep.
Dynasty, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the age difference with Kelsey for sure puts him over the top.
Yep.
Obviously, he's a stud. Let's move on to the wide receivers because we got to talk about Deebo Samuel first off. A news update came out today, July 28th, that the GM there is not really sure if Deebo is going to be ready. He might miss a few games. This is what we knew it was going to happen. This is kind of what we had planned for, we had thought about. Obviously, he's coming off that Jones fracture, which is the broken bone on the outside of the foot. This area has pretty bad blood supply to it, so essentially it takes longer to heal than a normal fracture of a different part of your body. So with that in mind, we're talking about a weird offseason. We're talking about an injury in a weird offseason. We're talking about barely any practice reps together on the field. That timeline, like, is he really going to be ready for week one? Major question marks about that. And then you kind of look at, okay, now it's going to take him a few weeks to get back on the point. It's like week 5, week 6. Like, is he really going to be ready for the season? I don't know. And that's redraft. But in Dynasty, I think this provides a massive buying opportunity for Deebo Samuel. Are you guys in on buying low here with this injury?
I am, depending on what the selling price is, because prior to this injury, people were starting to look at Deebo as like, ooh, are we talking about a top 15 wide receiver of the future here? Because that's maybe what he looks like. And I don't really feel that way. I think them going out and getting Brandon Ayuk, who's very similar to Deebo, just kind of tells me that they don't have any intention of making Deebo a true wide receiver one. And I don't really see him becoming a top 15 guy, or maybe even a top 20 guy on a regular basis, with that being the case. So the buying window is better now than what it was, certainly. And if you want to get him at a lower price, now is definitely the time to buy. But I just wonder if the lower price is still low enough based off the expectations that Deebo owners probably have. Because I don't expect him to be a top 15 guy, and I don't even really expect him to be a top 20 guy on the regular. And I think that might be where his price might hover.
Yeah, I was never really a big Deebo guy with this last season. He had some very big splash plays, great after the catch, absolutely. But this offense just isn't set up to feature a wide receiver. This is a creative, get the ball into space to playmakers, whether that's a running back or a wide receiver. Oh, and feed George Kittle. And that's like the entire offense is based around that. So I don't like his long-term prospect very much. I think you can definitely argue that Brandon Ayuk is a better, more well-rounded wide receiver than Debo is. Like, absolutely. I think that he's a better route runner. I think that he's at times even stronger at the point of the catch than what we've seen out of Debo, but they are very, very similar players, right? These are guys that you want to give the ball to in space and create. And we've talked about it in the past. We think that Jimmy Garoppolo might lead the league with like the shortest average depth of target of every pass in the NFL this season. The longest passes in this offense are going to go to Kittle up the middle. Like those are going to be the big chunk plays. Other than that, it's going to be getting the ball in space to running backs and wide receivers. To me, this offense with this news about Debo going to be missing more time, Ayuk is going to have to play. Like, they don't have a choice other than to start him, even with no preseason. It's going to be like, all right, well, you're going to be out there, and we're going to design some packages to get you the ball, and that's going to be what they do. But to me, I'm kind of wondering, are there going to be like 2 or 3 running backs on this team that are getting touches every single week? Like, are you going to see Raheem Mostert get touches and Tevin Coleman and potentially Jerick McKinnon if he's back and healthy in this offense, which means that the ceiling for all is low and all 3 of them are going to get some touches. Who's the one that's going to punch it into the end zone and be flex, worthy, or maybe RB2? I have no idea. I don't want any part of this offense other than George Kittle or Brandon Ayuk for Dynasty. Because they don't care about the running back position, so neither do I. And I don't trust Deebo Samuel to be a true wide receiver 1 or even a true wide receiver 2, like Matt Okada was saying. I think that he's more of like going to be a flex play throughout his career. I'm Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle. I don't even really want Garoppolo. Like, those are the 2 pieces in Dynasty that I want.
Even in Superflex?
I'll take them. Like, you need depth at the quarterback position, but there's
not
other
a
quarterbacks
QB2 for you, though.
Like, there's other quarterbacks going in that range that I would rather have. I would rather have Teddy Bridgewater than Jimmy Garoppolo.
That I don't disagree with. That's pretty decent. But I will say, like, you talked about him having the lowest depth of target, and I probably agree with that, but he's also probably going to lead the league in yak by his pass catchers.
Oh, for sure.
So it kind of helps balance out. I mean, he was a QB 14 last year, so I think
he had the one week against New Orleans where he put up like a quarter of his fantasy.
That was a lot. Yes, that was
like that. If you take out that game, I'd be curious to see what his finish would look like.
Yeah, I don't expect him to be a QB1, that's for sure. But I think he can be a mid-range QB2 pretty reliably. So I'm not excited about him, and he's probably in a similar tier to Teddy Bridgewater, though I kind of think I like Bridgewater more as well. But I'm okay with him. Obviously, I love Kittle. There's no question about that. I will overpay for Kittle, including, near first round of startups. And beyond that, it's a crapshoot. I'd probably just go with the cheapest running back, to your point, because, I mean, you asked, are there going to be guys in the same week? I think there's going to be guys in the same drive. There might be multiple guys on the same play that are doing stuff, because there's just going to be a rotation. Jerick McKinnon might get more work because of the lack of pass catchers. Right. Yeah, they're going to be using them all, and probably pretty frequently. So I would probably just pay the low price, whatever that is. And it's not Raheem Mostert, I can tell you that much right now.
Quarterbacks going after Jimmy G, Kirk Cousins, Teddy Bridgewater, Gardner Minshew. I would take all 3 of them over Jimmy G.
Yeah, I think it's what you're looking for, right? Like, do you want a lot of upside at your quarterback too?
Right.
And take Minshew. I mean, he could rush for 500 yards this year. Or Jimmy G, who we know is going to be quarterback 2 for the next 5 years, right? Like, so it kind of depends on what you want. I've been kind of saying all offseason, like, I feel like Jimmy G is kind of sneaky this year in redraft leagues because of how much they ran the ball last year. But then, of course, Debo had to break his foot. And so I don't know. But regardless, I think he's a solid QB2 in Superflex. I agree, though, with the running backs, man. I mean, if at all you can get out of any of these running backs and get capital back, I am doing it in a heartbeat. And as soon as like the rumors came out about, Raheem Mostert wants a trade, he's not happy with his contract, I put Tevin Coleman on every trade block I could in my Dynasty leagues. Fortunately, unfortunately, I should say, no one bit. So I still have him. However, I am trying to get rid of those assets because I agree. I mean, we see them take anyone off the street and just plug them into the lineup and say, here you go, carry the rock. And there's a couple undrafted free agents that are getting a little bit of buzz. Now, again, it's a weird offseason with the timing and everything, but Salvin Ahmed is one name to monitor, and then Jermichael
Hasty. Yep.
I like his game quite a bit, actually. He's pretty explosive. So just 2 names to monitor. Be sure to monitor that in August in training camp, see what the buzz is about those running backs. Boys, anything else with the Niners?
No, I don't think so. We covered it.
We're going to LA. Time to talk about the Rams.
Ooh, now that's an interesting
Rams. Team. All right, let's start with the running back situation. Okay, we have Darrell Henderson.
Oh my!
It was not great last year. It was not even good. It was not even average. It was quite bad, actually. Of course, Todd Gurley is behind a massive opportunity here with this situation with the running back room looking like a complete question mark. They go out and they draft Cam Akers, running back out of Florida State, who I feel like you two have been higher on than me. I'm coming around on him quite a bit, though. He's still learning the running back position. You know, he was a Wildcat quarterback in high school, just learned the running back position at Florida State. And so there's still room to grow for him. But obviously, you know, we have to talk about of those two options. I think it's pretty clear we want Cam Akers, but at what cost, right? Because Darrell Henderson, you can get for a bag of peanuts. People like Cam Akers. You have to pay up probably a first to get him. You had to invest a first-round rookie pick to get him in this year's class. What are we doing with this backfield? Is it stay away? Are you going out and getting Akers aggressively? Like, what should dynasty owners do?
Honestly, both, in my opinion, because
stay away with buy.
Yeah, because here's the thing. Unless we see a huge change from McVay, and I don't expect this to happen, what we've seen out of the Rams for the last few years, and yes, it was Todd Gurley who was a great running back, but just the way the system worked, they ran it mainly through one guy. And I think they're going to continue to do that. I don't, some news came out recently that he likes what Shanahan does and he's going to try to maybe do a little bit of that. That's poppycock. They're not going to do that. They're going to pick one guy and they're going to ride this player. I think it's going to be Cam Akers. I feel very confident about that because I think he's very good. And I think Darrell Henderson is okay at best as an athlete and a running back, and below average as a book smarts guy, or more importantly, playbook smarts guy, because as we saw last year, he couldn't learn it. So, but having said that, in the off chance that Akers is a bust for some reason, and there's always a chance with these guys, and Darrell Henderson takes a step forward, figures out how to learn a playbook, and flashes the athletic ability that we know he has and the big play ability that we know he has from college, and turns that into production at the NFL level, and suddenly is the RB1 there, I'm going to feel very sad if I only have Akers. So considering the cost on Henderson, I'm probably willing to get both. I just drafted Cam Akers in a startup with a bunch of our patrons that we're doing. And spoiler alert, I'll probably try to get Darrell Henderson at some point. Don't take him from me, guys who are listening, because I know you all are. But I think that's probably the safest bet.
Yeah, I think if you have Henderson, you hold, and you see how this shakes out.
Yep.
If you have Cam Akers, you hold, and you see how this shakes out.
Yep.
If you don't have Cam Akers, who I think is a much better running back than Darrell Henderson is, go buy Cam Akers after week 2. Like when this season starts off slow without the preseason, and Cam Akers isn't being heavily featured in the offense in the first couple weeks, with Darrell Henderson getting the first crack at it, which I think is going to happen, then go try to get Cam Akers from the frustrated owner that was like, I used a mid-first round rookie pick on this guy and he's sitting on the bench or getting 4 to 6 carries a game. Like, what the hell? Why do I have this guy on my team? Try to go get him when things get off to a slow start for him. He's going to take that job sooner than later, and I think he's a good running back, and he's going to fit that offense really well. They love to use the running back. They love to use the running back inside the 5. They love to pass to the running back in the red zone. Cam Akers, pretty good at catching the ball and very elusive, has great footwork. I think they probably drafted him because he made the most out of absolutely nothing that his offensive line gave him. And hey, guess what? The Rams have a terrible offensive line. So maybe they think he's going to be able to create for them. I think he's going to come into that offense. This offense is, I think, going to take a step forward from kind of the disjumbledness that we saw back there last year. I think that he's a really good dynasty asset, and he's going to end up taking that job at some point.
Yeah, to your point, averaged 4 yards after contact per attempt last year.
Ridiculous.
Really, really good metric there. Caught 69 passes. in college in 3 years. So yeah, he can catch the football. He can do it all. I think I'm talking myself into the idea of like highlighting him as like, okay, like John said, wait and see what happens and then pounce when Darrell Henderson gets the first crack. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I see a running back come into the league and just fall on their face and like not even really get a chance to do anything, it's like, what went wrong? Like something had to go wrong. And they put pretty good draft capital into Henderson last year.
Yeah.
And then they had glaring massive holes on the defense at their depth positions. Obviously, the line is a huge concern. And they still went out and spent the 52nd overall pick on Cam Akers. So it says something. I think I'm talking myself into him quite a bit more here in Dynasty. Okada, anything else to add?
Out of curiosity, just throwing this out there, if you can get Darrell Henderson for a bag of peanuts, you can get Malcolm Brown for a handful of peanut shells. And he was the guy who filled in for Gurley whenever that was necessary. Scored a decent amount of touchdowns, 5 last year. He capitalized on those red zone opportunities that they gave him. If Akers turns out to be a bust and Henderson is as bad this year as he was last year, is there a small chance that Malcolm Brown has a role that's worth owning and starting in fantasy leagues? And if so, should we go get him for his peanut crumbs price?
I mean, what are we talking, like a 4th round rookie pick? Sure.
Yeah.
If you want to buy into that narrative, but like,
or a throwaway in a trade, basically.
Yeah, I like that. Like, hey, like if you're getting, let's say you're getting Henderson or you're getting one of the other dudes and you're like, yeah, like I need one more depth piece. Can you just throw me Malcolm Brown? The guy's going to be like, yeah, sure. Take him. I don't care. So that's fine. I'm not actively going out to acquire him personally, but
that's pretty fair.
Yeah.
No, that's exactly it. If you're making another trade and you're gonna do the trade and it looks good for you, and that person has Malcolm Brown way down there on the 19th bench spot on their deep dynasty roster, be like, you just want to kick in Malcolm Brown too? Yeah, sure.
I would do it if you just did that. I would totally be.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Sure. Fine. Take him.
I can't wait to start him for like one game this year, and he's going to smash for 20 for 90 yards and a touchdown.
Yep.
On to the passing game. It wasn't great last year for Jared Goff in general. Like the touchdown rate plummeted 3.5%. We talk about regression. Guys, it's coming back for Jared Goff. He's probably one of my favorite sneaky super flex quarterbacks to buy because he has that fringe QB1 upside that no one really wants on the roster. Like the name just kind of leaves like a gross taste in your mouth, right? Like they lose Brandon Cooks, Todd Gurley is gone, this offensive line is terrible. Whatever narrative you want to paint for Jared Goff, it's probably going to get debunked this year. I mean, you just look at, he has all 5 linemen coming back, and yes, they weren't great, but he still has the continuity there. He has 2 awesome wide receivers in Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. Tyler Higbee could be the next star tight end. We just talked about Cam Akers as a pass catcher. Guys, Sean McVay's offense in the past 3 years has never been worse than 11th in scoring in the NFL. I'm buying Jared Goff as a bounce back this year.
Yes, please. Absolutely no question that Jared Goff is a huge buy right now, a huge target in your dynasty startups if you're still having them. Go get him whatever it takes. Listen, the offensive line last year that was terrible, it was banged up. They lost a lot of their starting pieces. They had rookies starting for large portions of the year. It's going to get better. It pretty much has to because it was arguably the worst in the league last year. The loss of Todd Gurley is, if anything, going to put more on the shoulder of Jared Goff. And by the way, I don't think their defense is going to be any better than it has been recently. That could be going the wrong direction as well. So we could be seeing Jared Goff start to go more towards a Jameis Winston style of fantasy production or a Blake Bortles of old, where this team is not we're talking, they have been one of the best teams in the league in Jared Goff's career since he took over as a starter full time. Now we might be looking at a situation where they're last in the division or certainly third in the division, just fighting to be 8-8. And all of that is probably going to look a little bit better for a quarterback who can rack up garbage time points. And, you started naming off the weapons bets. And I think that, if we ask each other or if you ask someone on Twitter, quick, off the top of your head, name the best offensive weapons or the best pass catching weapons in the league. Everyone goes Chiefs. Everyone goes Cowboys. Anybody else come off Buccaneers, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
They don't have the tight end really, but certainly the 2 wide receivers. Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, and Higbee plus Everett is in that tier, in my opinion. Those are incredibly good, reliable, and explosive weapons that are going to boost Jared Goff the more they come into their own. Tyler Higbee and Jared Everett are both young tight ends. Cooper Kupp's not that old of a wide receiver. He's just kind of starting to come into his own. Robert Woods, certainly a veteran, but he's still everything that he has been since becoming a Ram. This is a great situation of pass catchers. This is a great coach. This is an offense that's going to rebound. It's an offensive line that's going to rebound. Jared Goff is a good quarterback, I would say. Certainly not great. Certainly gets rattled. Not great.
He's all right.
But he's not bad by any means.
Perfectly fine.
Yes,
exactly.
He is perfectly fine. And that is not how he's being valued. I have him in for this year, for 2020, as my quarterback 9.
Ooh.
And that could get even better. We haven't even talked about Van Jefferson, a second-round wide receiver who I actually really like. Great route runner that I think could boost that pass-catching core even more and do more than Brandon Cooks did, potentially, to fill out the interest of this pass-catching core. So I am 100% in on Jared Goff, in case that wasn't clear from my ranked.
Yeah, I'm on record as saying that I think this is going to be the only offense this year that puts up 2 top 12 fantasy wide receivers. I think that Cooper Kupp and Bobby Trees, are going to be the obligatory Bobby Trees reference, are going to be the only teammate, the only duo wide receivers that crack the top 12 together this season. They're going to be playing from behind a lot. The defense just isn't there. They're going to have to air it out. Yeah, I'm with you that he's a great value. The good thing is that I don't love Jared Goff at all. And I'm probably going to have him ranked substantially lower than you do. I think I already do. But he's a great value where he is, and the upside makes him someone, if I'm going late quarterback, yeah, sure. I'll take Goff at one of those tries. Now, what scares the pants off of me is those absolute clunkers he'll hang up every once in a while. He did it last year. I think it was against San Francisco when he was on my fantasy team, and I lost. I only needed 8 points from him,
and I'm not
and I lost. And I'm not at all jaded.
To be fair, everybody was bad against the Niners, but yes.
Yeah, and guess what? He has to play him twice. So I don't know. It's tough. But yes, he's in a great position to succeed. I think that offense is going to kind of bounce back. The defense is not what it was. It's basically Aaron Donald, and that's about it. They overpaid by $1 million for Jalen Ramsey. Yeah. So they've got one stud corner and one stud defensive lineman, and that's about it at this point. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think he's a great value. The wide receivers, I'm all in on for sure. And if you're all in on 2 wide receivers, you have to be in on the quarterback. You can't not. So, yes. Okay. Yes.
Out of curiosity,
there it is.
Is your 2 top 12s more of a bold prediction, or you actually have it ranked that way? And Betz, how close do you have it to being 2 in the top 12?
I am super close in redraft. Off the top of my head, I think Woods is 11 and Kupp is 14. I've got them right there on that fringe wide receiver 1. They might flip-flop in my mind. The more I look at this, Kupp might go higher than Woods. Woods might slot down a couple. But I think they're going to end up being right there at that fringe wide receiver 1 ranking.
For me, I have Cooper Kupp. Let me look here. At 13, I have Robert Woods at 16. So they're both right there. And I feel like it just was so that tier in redraft leagues, from 10 to 19, I feel like
it's all
so
one
close.
It's all one.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of preference. But yeah, I could see both of them being a wide receiver 1 this year in fantasy.
Maybe I'm on crack, but I have them at 8 and 10.
I can see it.
Okay, buddy.
So you want to talk about buying in? I am 100% bought in.
You have to be based on where you put Goff.
True.
Has to. You've got all 3 of them at being screaming bargains at their positional ADP.
Love it. Fellas, let's finish up here. Well, actually, real quick, Okada, just tell the people more about Van Jefferson. You mentioned you like him a lot. Talk about his game, and then maybe what you're willing to go out to get him. Let's talk about 2021 rookie picks.
Yeah, so receiver out of Florida, good production in college. Arguably one of the better route runners in this entire class. Not, he fell to the second round because beyond that, he doesn't necessarily offer like the Henry Ruggs speed or the Jalen Reagor speed. The first round this year was pretty much go get the speed, and he's not the elite prospect that CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy are. But I think that the second round, 57th pick overall is where he went, is actually higher than a lot of people did think he was going to go. And I think it confirmed a little bit for me that I do like him. I like the idea of another good route runner in this offense. This offense is predicated on, good route runners, good scheming, getting people into space, putting Cooper Kupp in the slot and having him be so wide open that it's embarrassing for defenses. Van Jefferson might slide into similar sorts of roles. I think it's not going to be an immediate thing. I do not expect anything from him out of year one. I probably don't even necessarily expect much from him out of year two. But he's a guy that I'm very willing to stash, and you're going to be able to get him in the third round, or I don't know. Is he even going later than that potentially?
He's going in like fourth, yeah.
Yeah, late third
draft?
or fourth. Yeah, rookie draft pick. So with that kind of price, if somebody did take a shot on him, it was probably just a shot because they saw his name mentioned somewhere. He was next in the MFL queue, and you could probably go throw a pick at them a third next year and feel great about it if they take that, or have him as a piece like we talked about with some other players. So, more of a maybe a little bit of a couple years down the line prospect, but somebody that I like stashing for sure.
Yeah, he's definitely kind of fighting for that third wide receiver spot in that offense. He's not an uber athletic wide receiver. He's I'm like looking at it right now. He's 6'1", 200, ran a 4.57 40. So, he doesn't jump off the page in terms of any sort of measurables or anything like that, but he's a very good route runner. And if I remember correctly from the film, he's really good on contested catches as well. Yes. So that is something that could definitely bode well if they're going to go to a 3-wide setup, and get him in there as the third. He could be a really good jump ball target for that offense. At 6'1", he's the tallest wide receiver on the team, I think, if I remember correctly.
Possibly.
Which is not a super tall wide receiver to be the tallest on the team, but I'm pretty sure he's got the most length, good jumper, good at contested catches. Again,
Kupp
this is someone that Kupp 6'2".
Yeah, and I expect Kupp to be the main red zone threat. So
yeah, he will for sure. He'll be the main red zone threat, absolutely. But he's an interesting target, interesting kind of prospect play. Going to take him a couple years, like Okada said. But yeah.
All right, fellas, tight ends. Let's finish this up. I don't understand the discrepancy in ADP, in redraft, in dynasty, in best ball, and anything.
What do you mean you don't understand it? You understand it perfectly. You just might disagree with the reasoning.
What do you mean? But listen, man, like I get what Tyler Higbee did last year, but we talk about in dynasty being like, okay, I'm selling high, I'm buying low. That's kind of what I like to do anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler Higbee is a sell. I mean, like what he did last year is not sustainable.
No, there's no question about that. But that's not his price though.
Right, but for the first 10 weeks of the season, he was an afterthought. Gerald Everett was on pace for 61 receptions. He was also playing as the every down tight end. Tyler Higbee was rotating in. Now we just have to ask ourselves, what do you believe? Do you believe that Sean McVay says, all right, that's my tight end of the future? Or is Gerald Everett really what he wants? And Tyler Higbee just came out of nowhere and was like, oh, this guy smashed. Like, maybe now I have to go play him. I don't know. But regardless, in ADP, I'm willing to go out and buy Gerald Everett at the tight end 40 in dynasty leagues. That's the point I want to make. Is just like,
yeah,
he's free.
That is by far the best point to make. You need to go get Everett. Whether you have Higbee, whether you don't have Higbee, I don't care who your tight ends are. Go get Gerald Everett. We talk all the time on this show about how, you love to have an elite guy and you love to have a stash of 3 or 4 young guys deeper on your bench, one of whom in 3 years is going to develop into that next tight end one, because that's typically how it happens. Gerald Everett is a perfect fit for that strategy. I would love to stash him because he is good. He has shown several flashes, and there is still a chance he is the tight end one. Now, I don't think there's much of a chance that he's more than the 1A, and I don't think he even will be the 1A. I think he will be the 1B at best, and probably the 2. But there are still chances. As for Higbee, listen, it's super tough with him because, to your point, what he did at the end of last year, no way that's sustainable. It was disgusting. If he had a season of a full season of games like that, not only would he be the greatest tight end of all time, single season, it would be one of the greatest receiving seasons of all time. Forget the position.
If he put up a full 16 games at the pace he did at the end of last year, it might be close to what Okada has projected for Hunter Henry.
2,000 yards and 14 touchdowns. Here we go, baby.
Yeah, listen, it was unnatural. You know what? I'm going to pull it up real quick, all right? Let's see the 16-game pace. 16-game pace. Here you go. This was his last 5 games when he took over. 138 catches on 179 targets for 1,670 yards. Only 6 touchdowns, by the way, in that projection. Okay, but so here's the thing. Clearly not going to happen. That is not what we're going to expect out of Tyler Higbee. No. And if people are selling at that price, there's no way you're buying. And if people are buying at that price, definitely sell. But that's not the case. Everybody knows that we're not going to quite see that. The question is, what are we going to see? And the biggest question, like Betz brought up, is what does McVay see and what does he want to do with these two guys? And for me, it kind of boils down to this. Yes, McVay liked Everett more in the beginning of the season. Maybe that was a preseason thing. Maybe that was a training camp thing. Maybe Everett showed out better. Maybe Higbee in the practices was not doing what he was supposed to do. I don't know. But when you put a guy out on the field in NFL game situations and he plays as well as Tyler Higbee did for that 6-game stretch, I don't think there's any way you go away from that. He was too good. I think you figure out a way how to feature that guy and continue to mold that guy into a top weapon on your team. So you go. I've ranted, but
I was just going to say, still. Yeah, what I think about Higbee's production down the stretch last year is I think that he forced McVay to look at his offense as continuing to roll with the 12 personnel, which he went to out of necessity because Brandon Cooks was hurt. And it kind of changed the mentality of the offense. Like, okay, well, let's pare it down. Let's run more, 2 wide receiver sets instead of 3. Let's get more tight end on the field. Kind of went to it out of necessity. But what he did was show, like, dude, our offense is really good when Tyler Higbee's on the field. And I think he's got to continue to go with that a majority of the time. So I think we are going to see more 12 personnel out of this offense. 1 running back, 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers. Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods. And I think that Gerald Everett's going to be the 1A in that offense. Now, I think his ADP Tyler Higbee, not Gerald Everett. Tyler Higbee is going to be the 1A in that offense. I think his ADP is going around like the tight end 9 or 10, if I remember right now in startups.
Dynasty?
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I'm fine there. I think that that's a good price for him. I'm not paying like a top 5 tight end price, but yeah, if I can hold off and, if I miss out on one of the studs early, if I don't get Kittle, I don't get Kelsey, and I don't get Mark Andrews or Zach Ertz for that matter, at that point, if I'm not getting one of those 4, then I think that Higbee's a really good target a few rounds later. Like someone that I'm going to be like, okay, I'm going to try to position myself to make sure that I can get him. Because going in that range, I think that that's a really good price. And he could be that next, Mark Andrews-esque tight end. He showed the ability to do it, albeit in a small sample size. But he could be kind of one of those next breakout tight ends in the league. I'm not willing to pay for him at that price, but he's got the potential to get there.
Alrighty. I like it, boys.
I'm going to throw out one final tight end draft strategy point off of John's thing, and then we can shut it down because we went way too long on the Rams. I don't know how we ended up talking this long about the Rams.
We were doing so good, man. We had 50 minutes.
I know. Right? Fully on track. Nope, screw it. We're talking about the Rams for half an hour.
Hey, let's go.
John is sort of starting to lean towards a new tight end draft strategy that I've been considering. So you guys know that I love getting the guy early, right? But that's hard to do. And if you can't get the guy early, a new thing that I'm really liking in Dynasty is getting 3 of the guys that are considered the potential breakouts. So the Higbees, the Jonnu Smiths. Hunter Henry is a more expensive version of that, but maybe Hunter Henry.
Mike
Gesicki. Mike Gesicki. Yes, Gesicki for sure.
Ian Thomas.
Sure, Ian Thomas.
Herb Smith Jr. There's a ton. There's so many in that range.
And if you get 3 of those guys, the chance that one of them ends up being a top 5 tight end is very high, in my opinion. So if you can't get that guy up front, maybe spend a little bevy of mid to late round picks stocking up on that tier, and then figure out which one breaks out, and that you're set with that guy.
I like it. Words of wisdom from Okada. On that, and on that note, we'll close out the show. Fellas, this is my last show for a little bit of time. Listeners, I'm getting married this weekend. So
hey,
super excited. I am unfortunately somehow leaving this podcast in the hands of Okada and John unsupervised. So I apologize to all of you in advance. But I'll be back at some point, probably in like 3 or 4 weeks, or 3 or 4 episodes. So you guys have time. You can do whatever you want.
It's going to be great. This is going to be fantastic.
Maybe we'll get Cater Michelle on to join, talk some Dynasty. We'll see. Bring on a guest. Guys, have fun. I'll be listening. I'll miss you all. Of course, you too. Follow us on Twitter at Matt Okada, at Dynasty Beard, at The Fantasy PT. And of course, the show is at Redshirts FF Pod. If you want to support the show, patreon.com/ballblast is a place to do it. Until next time, wear the red shirts.